Thank you, everyone, for jumping on this evening for our patient community advocacy training program. This is an excellent opportunity for you to learn how to be an advocate, both for yourself and for others, for your loved ones, those in the community, those you might be volunteering with or visiting. And occasionally you may find that some will ask you to be a patient advocate. And what that means is what we're going to dive into tonight. And what it involves ultimately is you being there present at the doctor's office or in an appointment with someone who's asked you to be present. When someone will take our Being With My Story visitors training, they will begin with the understanding that they want to visit with others. And either you're already visiting currently or you are interested in starting to visit in the community, perhaps it's with your own family. In our Being With My Story visitors program, training, we often will introduce visiting into communities as a caring for our own, meaning we encourage you to start visiting within your own community. That means your family, people perhaps who are strange in your family that you haven't spoken to for a while, someone who, for example, has moved away or maybe feels forgotten, feels perhaps some isolation, and they with that comes feelings of obviously neglect and feeling depressed and lonely. So we encourage people to visit. It's important. I encourage my own community. Myself, I have 5 young children. We visit with my children in local visiting nursing homes and long-term care facilities. And we encourage other moms as well to come out and visit with their kids as well. And of course, if a person is single or married, couples, we will often recommend that they visit in pairs if you don't know the person. So today really is an opportunity to empower you, to empower others. Tonight, you're going to gain the skills and confidence to be an advocate in the healthcare system. Tonight's training is free. And thanks to my co-host, Alex Schattenberg, for joining us for these, because he comes with a wealth of knowledge and expertise in the field, and ultimately and handling a form of experience that comes with visiting. He himself has visited. He comes from the background of visiting as well. He was raised in that understanding and that tradition. And that's why we're trying to bring back that tradition and the culture of visiting amongst those you know and being in a vibrant person in the community, ultimately helping others as well. And so sometimes what may happen is that when you are in fact visiting, someone that you are speaking to may ask you, Aaliyah, Rex, I really appreciate you coming in and seeing me and participating in my day-to-day, once or twice a week, however much you come by. But I am finding that I'm a little bit anxious about a particular appointment. And so what will happen is a person at some point may ask you as their volunteer visitor to go out and actually go to an appointment with them. And that over COVID, we saw that happen over the phone. Sometimes we saw it on Zoom. We saw participation being asked for, just being present on a telephone call or Zoom. But in person is another level because you're obviously going to meet with them and you're meeting with a medical professional. And it could be a doctor, a specialist, someone in the medical profession who's going to speak to them about their situation. And what we want you to come away with tonight is this soft place to land, that knowing that you can do this. Okay. It's not hard. It's not something that can't be taught. And that's why we're teaching this today, how you can actually become an advocate. And by doing so, you're advocating for yourself and others. It's a very important skill. It's necessary to inform others. And because you're going to be ultimately advocating for yourself eventually one day, it's a good skill to have now. And it's something that you can then transmit your own needs, your abilities, your wishes, ultimately your desires. And it is a skill that can be learned and it results in empowerment. So that's why tonight is so important. We hope you appreciate the information that we're going to set in front of you, because there is quite a bit of information that you will come across. Now, why do some people, excuse me, need advocates? Well, one, it's you can be their voice. You can be there to express their needs and what some of their frustrations might be, even what are some of the things that they're concerned with. You can be a friend, an ally. Sometimes people just simply don't have anyone, and often we see this. We get a lot of concerns as seniors who call us and say, I have no one. Who can I reach out to? And so then we go out into the community and seek out opportunities where there is befriending that can happen, obviously. Okay. And so knowing that, you obviously have a very important role, and that role makes you bring the bear of impact and purpose. And ultimately, you are going to be the one who is going to make a difference through this opportunity. Now, what is an advocate? An advocate is a person who is representing another person with them, ultimately behind them, standing them as a support person. So, really, all it is a support person. And what you can do is you can talk with the person ahead of the meeting, you can support them, you can act, excuse me, act or speak on their behalf, excuse me, according to their instructions. And so, what will often happen,
Kathy, why don't you get some water and I'll continue?
oh, sure, thanks.
Okay, an advocate also empowers their client by helping them to understand the system that affects their lives and access the care they need and make intelligent, informed decisions regarding their goals. So, what you'll find often is that somebody who you might be advocating for is having a difficult time getting the services that they need, as an example, or they might have visited the doctor and the actual, how would you say, medical needs they had may not have been brought up because they really needed someone to help represent them or be with them. I will say, as I said in the beginning, that most of the people who have taken this advocacy training program have done so because they're involved with a family member. But with the visitor training program, we recognize that you might be visiting people who are, let's say, in your community, your church group, whatever that might be, people who you would know, but then after you're visiting them, you come to the realization this person really could use an advocate because they're not getting the care that they need. So how do you help the person? Well, you help stand up for their individual rights. So there's a whole issue of they have certain rights. They have, especially if they're in a nursing home, they have certain rights. You obtain and maintain opportunities for their involvement in the community. Not only their involvement in the community, but gaining access to not only disability related services, but other healthcare services or services that they might need. As we're going to say again, when you're visiting a doctor with this person and you're bringing up certain needs because the doctor hasn't been to that person's apartment or their home. They don't know that they have these special needs. The fact that it also is that someone might not be properly caring for themselves anymore and they might need help that way. Remember, as I say, doctors are often the gatekeeper to the care that you're going to receive. You speak to the healthcare providers. Now, you might just be present, but that might be also the reality. But nonetheless, you're helping them with their healthcare providers. What is an advocate not? An advocate is not a counselor. That's not what we're doing. We're not counseling. We're not dealing with incompetent people either. You're actually representing someone who has a level of competency, so you're helping them. You're not making decisions for that other person. It right here becomes an issue because you might not agree with the decisions the other person wants, and you may not be able to be an advocate for everybody. You're not providing medication. That's not your role. Somebody might have that type of a role, meaning that if it's a family member, close family member, or let's say you have a nursing background, but that's totally different. The role of the advocate is not to provide medication, and you're not a case manager. You're not providing case management. You are there to help them receive the care and the services that they need. You're also helping them as a friend. You're helping them express themselves when they're going to a doctor's appointment, etc. So what does an advocate have to do? I find this very difficult because there are key issues here that seem to be difficult. You must be a good communicator. Not everyone's a good communicator. You must be willing to ask questions, but you also must be a good listener. These are sort of basic things because obviously if you're helping somebody, you need to hear what's going on with the doctor is saying or with the medical person or whoever it might be saying in order to help provide the services that they need or get the service they need. You must be courteous and respectful. I can't um, I can't emphasize this enough, but then the next one seems to be a difficulty. You must be courteous and respectful, yet be assertive and persistent. These are not opposites. You must be always very, very respectful. Yet at the same time, if you're going to help somebody, you're going to have to find that you have to be assertive, and that might be very difficult. You must respect the person's privacy, absolutely, without a question. You're dealing with somebody who you might be helping them achieve certain medical care, but that's their issue, that's their needs. Its privacy is fundamental. Knowledge is power, absolutely. You identify or anticipate the client's unmet needs. That's done through conversations with the person, and that helps them receive the care that they need by having these conversations ahead of time. Kathy, did you want to start or should I
Yeah,
keep going for a
I
time
can
bit?
go ahead. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, very good.
So ultimately, when you're talking about advocacy, there are some legal terms and things that you want to be familiar with. The next slide. What is an advocate? Well, it's ultimately a person that supports or promotes the interests of another person. And so what that is ultimately is that it's a relationship, and on its own, it carries no legal authority. It's not a legal document that's represented ultimately that you have. It's never meant to interfere with or supersede the judgment of the other person, but rather help them with their needs. So, for example, in our booklets, some of you may have received a link. All of you would have received it to our patient advocacy training manual, and in that booklet, you'll have um, a questionnaire that will help you. So when you are actually, in fact, um, going through the patient advocacy agreement, it's called the patient advocate agreement. It's on page 49. Um, I will post that in the chat as well. You'll be able to kind of check off all the things that you, as an advocate, have access to. That includes things like access to medical health records, etc.
So I have it on page 51. Is it just a little different or?
It might be, yeah,
Okay, very good.
yeah, yeah. And so what this helps you to do is this document ultimately helps you to arrange consent. And so this is an agreement. I'll post it here in the chat. But what it often will happen, well, a lot of people are not familiar with what they need in terms of an advocacy agreement. And so when they actually end up having communication and they're not sure exactly what's involved, they want something like an outline. And this is actually giving you a very good outline that will help you as a patient advocate know exactly what's involved. And so you can ask them, do you want them to have access to the medical files? Do you want them to have in person, for example, be present with the doctor or healthcare provider when they speak to them, attend appointments, tests, and treatments with them, arrange medical appointments for them,
Mhm.
and being present in the room after an exam or write down information instructions. So in this chat, I'm going to now just post it so each of you can see. And this is a document link that you'll see on the chat. So feel free to download that. And you can even print that if you'd like to as well.
The other important thing with the contract is that you can't go visit, well, if you're a family member, it's not usually an issue, but if you're visiting on behalf of somebody who's not a family member, you're doing this as a friend, somebody in your community. Why would the doctor want you there if you've got no legal right to be there? See, so you've arranged consent ahead of time with the legal contract.
That's right. See, these are some important terms to know. And we'll go over all of these. What's an advocate? What's an healthcare proxy? An agent, meaning a healthcare power of attorney, versus a financial power of attorney and a guardian. Excuse me. So always remember that if you are an advocate, you are not authorized to make decisions for the other person. You're only there to represent their wishes. So as a support person is there, they can be quiet, they can be silent during that time. They could be more active or participating, but ultimately they're there to act as a support and an advocate to help them. And that can be outlined, like I said, ahead of time. An advocate's code of conduct. You will practice with compassion and respect for the person with whom you work. Your primary commitments are to promote the health, safety, and rights of the person. You will be, as an advocate, transparent in your work with the person, and you will maintain privacy on behalf of the person and keep confidential all activities and records. You will guide and assist the person in medical decision making, but at no time will you make decisions about their health or medical care or medical services on their behalf. And you will respect the person's values and belief system as a foundation for the decision making. You'll also, to be an effective advocate means to uphold the highest ethics and standards of practice. That means to practice with compassion and respect for your client and their family, to promote the health, safety, and rights of your client. Oh, just
Right. Sorry.
sorry, of your client and their family, to promote the health, safety, and rights of your client, to foster the autonomy of the person, to be transparent, to maintain privacy on behalf of your client, and keep confidential all activities and records according to agreements with them and any applicable laws. So, as an advocate, you're a person who's going to ultimately support and promote the interests and wishes of the other person. And in an advocacy relationship, obviously there's no legal authority, but you're not going to interfere and you're not going to supersede the judgment of that person. Now, just for background, a healthcare proxy is a person who acts if he or she is unable to make judgments or is unable to communicate. So, for example, a healthcare proxy is most commonly part of a document called a healthcare directive, an advance directive, or a living will. And what that means is a person will have a living will document prepared in the event that they are not able to make decisions on their own behalf. So they are declared either incompetent or they become incompetent at some point, and then that living will document is what is enacted and is in fact legal. It's a legal document. So that's not an advocate, and that's why it's completely separate. We want you to make sure that we distinguish these terms. Um, Now, an agent is under the power of attorney, is someone to whom the client has given legal authority to conduct business on their behalf. A power of attorney agents are not authorized to make decisions or take actions that go against the expressed or written wishes of their client. So, for example, there's a very good document for the healthcare power of attorney or living will, and that's provided by Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. Alex has it that, and it's a vetted document legally, and it will enable you to have all of the um, terms, all of the definitions, and all of the criteria met in terms of what is defined as your care and what a person who is declared incompetent wishes for them to have when it comes to their own care. If a person experiences any cognitive decline, their ability to make decisions may be compromised, either temporarily or permanently. And if you're acting as an advocate for someone with cognitive decline, you have to speak to their family. You can find out if the client has any powers of attorney. So, for example, in this case, the healthcare power of attorney is also known as a healthcare proxy. It's a document, and it's a person who is listed in that document is legally named to make medical decisions on behalf of the client. Okay, so that's separate from an advocate. And in terms of a financial power of attorney, that's a separate second category. And that often will be called a general power of attorney, which means it's set up to name a person who will handle all their financial affairs. A specific power of attorney is set up to handle a particular transaction as well. So, for example, if you have an executor, you'll have a listed in your will. You'll have a will which says who the in fact the executors are, and if there is one executor or two, and then you'll have a healthcare power of attorney and you'll have a financial power of attorney. What Alex and EPC provide is the healthcare power of attorney.
So there's,
Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say a few issues about this. So obviously, when you're advocating for someone, you're advocating for someone who is competent. So you're not their power of attorney for healthcare. The power of attorney for healthcare only kicks in when that person becomes incompetent and they've named you as that power of attorney. Now, the difference is that the power of attorney for healthcare has the full legal right to make all medical and healthcare decisions for that person and personal care decisions for that person because the law recognizes that these decisions are being made as if it were that person, but they're incompetent. So you're making those decisions for them if you're the healthcare power of attorney. Whereas the advocate, of course, is a competent person. Um, I think that what's important with the financial power of attorney as compared to a healthcare power of attorney is that with the healthcare power of attorney, you should only appoint someone who you trust with your health decisions. I make this very clear that people often will appoint to be the executor to the will, etc., as the oldest child. They'll say, well, so and so is the oldest child. We'll appoint them as the power of as our executor to our will, etc. But your oldest child might not be someone who shares your values, and so you don't want to make that person your healthcare power of attorney because they gain full power over your healthcare decisions in the time of your need. Now, our document in particular has instructions in it as to what you would want and not want. So that's very important. Now, financial power of attorney. I actually discourage people from signing a financial power of attorney while they're still fully capable themselves. I mean, when they're fully capable of themselves. And the reason for that is once you've signed the document, you've technically given the right to somebody else to make financial decisions for you. And there's been a lot of elder abuse that has been perceived and seen by family members. I had a case recently of a woman who called me up. She was the friend, so she became the power of attorney for healthcare of this friend of hers who had some significant health issues, but this woman wasn't actually dying anytime soon. So she has significant health issues, but she's not dying anytime soon. But her daughter, who was her financial power of attorney, treated the situation as if her mother was dying. So her mother sold everything. She sold everything her mother owned, daughter. She took all the money out of the bank account. So now I'm talking to this friend who's the healthcare power of attorney, and she's saying, well, so and so has a difficulty because she's got no money. Nope, nothing. Zippo. She has nothing. So if she was, when she's released from the hospital, she doesn't have an apartment. She doesn't have anything in it. She has nothing because everything's been sold off by her daughter, who was the financial power of attorney, sold everything off, and she took all the money from the bank. She's got nothing. This is a terrible situation. So you have to be very careful with these things, as I'm saying. I'm only bringing that up because it was a pretty terrible situation because you have someone who's not dying anytime soon, right?
Yeah. And just to piggyback on what you said there, a guardian is a person who has been appointed by a judge to take care of an incompetent adult personally and or manage that person's affairs. Guardians are authorized to make decisions without the knowledge or consent of their ward. So that's something that you don't see as common as often, but it does happen in fact. And so a person will be often appointed as a guardian if they're not already, because it is by the state. Okay, great. Thank you. So moving right along here, there is quite a bit to go through. So if you want, any of you can download the link that's in the chat. Feel free to use that. That's the manual that we have here presented to you this evening. So as a healthcare advocate, code of conduct, you are to guide and assist your clients in medical decision making, but at no time make decisions about health or medical care on their behalf. So as an advocate, again, we're not making decisions. As an advocate, you're not authorized to make decisions for the other person. You're only to represent their wishes. You can also promote use of your client's values and belief systems as the foundation for your decision making. So again, if a person asks you to be their advocate, but they have very different views in terms of what it means to be an advocate, even if it means, what their wishes are, things that you don't necessarily uphold, or needs or desires that you do not agree with, then you're likely not going to be a good advocate for that person. So again, you may want to you may want to give that some thought and to decide if in fact if you would be a good advocate for that particular individual, because sometimes people have very differing opinions when it comes to their own care, even when it comes to advocacy. To practice also as an advocate, you want to practice within your own competency. Any requests for services outside your expertise should be referred to someone who is equipped to provide those services. Also, we ask that you do not accept any money or gifts. Moving right along. Excuse me. Not to fulfill requests to perform illegal or unethical actions. Obviously, okay, and that's self-explanatory. To practice within your own competency. Yeah, we said that. And not, and yeah, we can move on. It's the same. Perfect. And so this is a good state. It's a good document to reflect on as well if you like additional reading. This is called the Residents' Bill of Rights. And what that means is it's available here. It's the Long-Term Care Homes Act 2007 version. And what it does is, in fact, goes over all the residents' Bill of Rights. Meaning, if you are a resident in a long-term care facility, you have rights. And as a person, if you know someone who lives in a long-term care home, they have a number of rights that are afforded them. And in that case, they're a resident. It means someone who's a person admitted to and living in a long-term care home. And so they have that access to that. It's online on our website, and you can also access it here within that document. Thank you. And
So
in
every resident
that,
has the right to be treated with courtesy and respect in a way that fully recognizes the resident's individuality and respects the resident's dignity. Every resident has the right to be protected from abuse, not to be neglected by the licensee or staff, to be properly sheltered, fed, clothed, groomed, and cared for in a manner consistent with his or her needs. to live in a safe and clean environment, to exercise the rights of a citizen, to be told who is responsible for and who is providing the resident's direct care, to be afforded privacy and treatment and caring for his or her personal needs, to have his or her participation in decision making respected, to keep and display personal possessions, pictures, furnishings in his or her room, subject to safety requirements and the rights of other residents. This is sort of important, actually, if you consider that when someone's in a nursing home, that room is their home. It might be a small home, but it's their home, and that's they need to be respected for their things in that home. There may be times when your client finds they are in a situation where they feel powerless and vulnerable. They may not want to risk angering people who they fear could make their lives difficult. This is particularly the case for residents in a medical or long-term care facility. As your advocate, you can help them through these stressful situations. I'll give you an example. When my mother-in-law was in a nursing home, she passed away several years ago. There was a staff member that was causing her significant distress. She regularly came in, and if she had any chocolate there or something, she would take it. She seemed to intentionally mix up laundry. I don't know if it was happening on purpose or what was happening. She was quite rude to her. And so what happened is my wife was talking to her mother, and she was saying that she was quite upset about these things happening to her. And she had no idea why this was happening. She just couldn't figure it out. But she did not talk to, when my wife said, "Did you talk to them?" She says, "No, I've not talked to anyone," because she was in fear it would be worse. So Susan then called up the the place and spoke to them about it. And my mother-in-law never saw that worker again. I have no idea if that worker was fired. I have no idea. I have no idea what happened to that worker. All I know is in that section of the building, that worker was never there again. So the fact of it is she just was afraid to talk about it because obviously she's in a different position as a resident than maybe someone who has some position of authority. And you could see how that was helpful. Now, my wife was not the official advocate, she was a daughter, but nonetheless, you could see how her speaking up made the difference. So effective advocates should look for positive solutions to problems and protecting the people that you care for. It is easy and sometimes understandable to criticize the people, organizations, or systems involved. Always speak positively and constructively. I've said that earlier also because, we've had phone calls, and Kathy knows it well, where there's been people calling and they're really upset about the care that so-and-so is getting. Like it could be a mother, it could be a family member, it could be a friend. And I'm not suggesting that the care they were receiving was okay and this person was making it up. What I'm saying is that sometimes the person calling us was very, very, well, they were upset, but they were also being so aggressive that the institution would then intentionally block them. And I always say, well, right off the bat, the first thing you have to do is you have to be very, 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 very polite, as well as, of course, you have to be, you have to be strong about things, but you have to be very, very polite because you don't want to be the person who now causes the further problem, even when you even are standing up for justice. So what are you doing? You're being present. That's how you're helping. You're creating empowering solutions. You must be aware of the options, you communicate choices, and you can obtain assistance through the CCC helpline at 1-855-675-8749. So it's very important that we recognize. Now, when we say we're being present, well, obviously you're being there with the person, you're helping that person, creating empowering solutions. I always talk about the fact that there's people who sometimes don't speak up for themselves, and yet they do have significant needs, especially when they're getting older and they might have some dementia and things like that, and they actually could use some service in the home every once in a while. Well, the fact of it is, if you're the advocate, you can help them achieve those things, aware of options. Now, that's another difficult thing because sometimes we don't know all the options that exist, and sometimes we have to make those phone calls and find out. I can tell my age when I say make the phone calls because anybody else would say text or something. But anyway, communicate with the different authorities to actually find out what options exist for somebody, communicate choices and options, etc. So communication tips. We're going to go in the next section. Kathy, you want to take this over or should I start it?
Yeah, I'm good. So with communication tips, obviously these are very common sense points here. We ask you to always be polite, sometimes painfully polite, and it's a
Yeah.
case where you don't really necessarily want to be, again, reiterating something again or emphasizing or really being assertive, but that's how you have to be. And just when you're doing so, making sure that you are polite as possible always. I just had this conversation a couple of days ago with a person Alex and I both know. And, sometimes when we are encountering new people and you have a person who's already been harmed by the system, sometimes they can come off as being quite um, bold or, sometimes a little bit condescending, it seems, right? So it can become a difficulty for some people that are used to being abused in the system to then now trust new people, newcomers who are coming in, part of their care team. So it's important to always be painfully polite, especially. Be clear about your position and or that of the organization you represent. Now, what happens here is that, in this case, if you are an advocate, you can state if a person has booked an appointment and the client has asked you to come, you can say that you could call ahead at the office and say to the secretary, yes, I'm coming, I'll be joining so and so as an advocate. And so you can say who you are and what you're representing. Always be helpful, right? That's important. Being patient but persistent again is important. Deciding what you are trying to communicate. So, for example, if you're trying to get an intended outcome, let's say it's a form of treatment, how is the best, most simplest way to achieve that outcome? Intentional. And so, what do you want to do? What do you want them to do? And how to communicate that effectively is what you want to be doing when you're in that appointment. If you have been misunderstood, correct and rephrase what you want to be transferred in terms of the information that's relayed. If you do not know an answer, just say so. If you do not understand a question, ask for clarification and listen carefully to the question. What is actually being asked of you or the person in the client? Make it very clear what you want them to do. So if you want them to take further action, what is the next steps? When can we expect a response? Are we booking another appointment? When will that be? Who will do that? What will determine finally the outcome, or what would you hope that this outcome will be? And always speak slowly. We try to speak slowly in order to ensure that people understand what we're saying. And it's important oftentimes to rephrase sometimes, especially for the client, what it is that the doctor actually is saying. Now, in terms of key activist listening skills, you want to be there to encourage, you're going to motivate, you're going to inquire. So, for example, all of these things are things that we're going to talk a little bit about today, but you may want to name the emotion sometimes. What that means is, I feel frustrated, or I feel anxious, or I feel anxiety when it comes to this next step. So, that's some things that you want to do is to help them name the emotion. You can redirect the conversation if it's not going the right way. You could say, let's pull the reins back here and say to the, discussion, I think we're veering off course here. Let's go back to the root of the issue that we want to be, focused on. And so redirecting that conversation is very key. Sometimes you may want to reflect to the person, back to them, what is in fact that they've said or what they understand. And rephrasing is important here. Silence. Sometimes you just may want to not say anything at all. And that's actually more, oftentimes, I find more impactful than in fact just babbling about, because that will not often encourage something, but will actually force someone to fill that void with commentary that is obviously proactive, supportive, and positive. And then summarizing. Sometimes you may need to summarize key things that are being said so that everyone is on the same page. Use I statements like I feel we are going on the right discussion when we're talking about what's important to Mrs. So and so or Mr. So and so. And then, of course, validate statements using things like stating, I understand that you feel frustrated. I feel that you are sharing your opinion and it's not really being heard. So, those are ways that you can validate some of the things that they're experiencing in that discussion. Now, when you disagree, again, you want to acknowledge the impact of the past because sometimes people will disagree on things. And if the client feels agitated for some reason, you want to discourage them, but you also want to acknowledge um, the past, whatever it may have had as an impact, as a role, in the discussion because some people feel very jaded, but you also want to discourage them from dwelling on that. So you want to remove them from that, reminder, focus on the present, bring them back to where you're currently situated, meaning that you're here for a reason. This is why we've all gathered here. We want to help you move forward in the best positive way and light possible. Focus on the problem, okay? And what is the solution? What is the solution? And even just to rephrase it back to the doctor, the specialist, the medical professional. If you were, if this was an issue in your shoes and you would be in these shoes, what would you do? I recently had to do this actually just a couple of weeks ago when my stepdad had a stroke and he was
Mm.
given a very narrow window, about 4.5 hours, to get a very strong medication. And the type of medication that is given in that first initial 4.5 window is something that will explode any blood clots in the brain. But if there's an existing issue or any kind of leak or any kind of tear, that could actually create more havoc. And there's a 6% chance potentially of death. So I actually turned the question around because we were faced with him in a half face paralysis, a medical professional in the middle of the night speaking through teleconference on the video camera and a screen like this large. And then you had an ER doctor faced in the same room discussing what options there are. And in order to discuss this thoroughly, we need to know all the facts. And then here I am as a translator, right, from one language to the next. So then I turned on the doctor and I said to him, simply said, if this was you, what would you do? And he actually said, I wouldn't take that narcotic. It's not worth the risk. So he pulled away actually and said, I wouldn't do it. So that made us reframe ourselves, realizing what it was, in fact, what would have been a good option for my own family member. You want to generalize again and again. I'm not saying this for you all to not choose that that drug if that ever happens to someone but there's certain positives and there's certain negatives with any medical decision, and with any treatment option you want to be aware of all the positives and all the negatives, because you don't want to be left in state of shock afterwards if there in fact is something that could happen, very serious. But you also don't want to generalize, so you want to ensure that when you are speaking to someone, you are capitalizing on the exact points that are being mentioned to him given their specific circumstance. You obviously want to listen, and obviously you want to be kind and compassionate, and this is something you want to keep ensuring as you go on in your meetings. Excuse me. Okay. Now, sometimes when we're talking about this topic of especially communicating with people with different personality types, these are four types of personalities that you may come across, and we're going to go over them quickly so that you have an idea of how to handle different personality types, where one is aggressors, another is contemplator, and another is mediator, and another is socializer. Okay. So for the aggressor, that's the individual that will often ask the what questions. They're asking what's happening, what is next, what are we going to do? Their biggest fear is losing control. These individuals are competitive, they're often goal oriented, they're demanding, and they're often blunt to the point, bold and direct in their communication, and they make quick decisions. So it's important here to understand that when you're speaking to someone who may be qualified as an aggressor, that you know how to respond. Don't kind of diddle daddle, but be direct and be on point when it comes to what is actually happening. We're moving on. Sorry. Now, tips to communicate with an aggressor are to actually be factual and accurate. Don't exaggerate. Be straightforward and ask challenging questions. So, again, don't tiptoe around the issues. Use simple language that educates them about the situation. For example, you want to be clear. The simplicity of the matter is often the beauty of it, and it's what most people appreciate. So, have structured conversations with tasks and goals for making decisions and achieving your objectives. You want to have conversations in a timely fashion. Don't rush it and don't have them feel rushed. Stand your ground, be strong and confident. Use indisputable I messages rather than judgmental you messages. So, for example, I feel that we're going along the right path when we're considering all the things that our client is in favor of. Remember that you do not have to agree, right? This is a point where you don't always have to agree, and sometimes you won't. And sometimes you have to part ways on that. Is if that's the discussion, that's the end of that point, and you may not have to come to full, acceptance of their disagreement. Keep them active in the decision making, which means, keep them involved. Try to encourage their involvement because it's important. Give them guides that they can follow and manage on their own. So these are things that will give you as a buffer in terms of a periphery or boundary. Where can you go when it comes to decision making? What is in their purview and what is actually outside of their jurisdiction? Now, the next type of personality is a contemplator. These are people who ask the why questions. Their biggest fear is criticism of their work or ideas. These individuals are often meticulous, introverted, and detail oriented. They can be perfectionists and they are suspicious of others. They may answer a question with a question. So, again, be prepared for that. And they're often good problem solvers. So, the ways and tips to communicate is to lay out the problem in a detailed and orderly manner. Be truthful and forthright in your conversations. So, you don't want to be, going around into other details, but you want to be very detailed. And it's very important that it's truthful, that you're honest when you come with your assessment of what's happening. Give breathing space before you expect a response. So don't expect them to just rush into an understanding of what will happen next, but give them some opportunity to move into that place. Ask them what they are thinking and feeling. So again, this is very important because you want to have them involved and you want them to feel involved because it is important to them as their contemplators. You want to ensure that you show empathy when they share concerns and worries. So you take that into consideration. You also want to bring a big picture view to the discussion, meaning, you don't want to dwell on the small details because that's where they can kind of go and be focused on. You want to bring it back out to the big picture in order to ensure that everyone is on the same page. You can use humor to bring them out of themselves and their worries. And again, this is, be tactful because sometimes you're in a heat of a situation. Someone just had a stroke. Sadly, things happen every day, right? And, some things will happen, but try to bring in the joke if you can, or bring humor, like if the person hasn't died, then you can say, at least they haven't died, right? You still have something to work with. So, but, anyways.
Yeah, after you and I have been involved with these issues too long, at least he hasn't died yet.
Yeah, exactly. They're not dead yet. Oh, anyways, sorry. Speak in a way that shows your appreciation and affirmation. That means you're showing, these people, contemplators especially, they love to be appreciated. So if you can tell them, hey, by the way, I really appreciate you did this for me, or hey, I really like how you designed this, or how you created that, or how you contributed this. Shows appreciation. They really respect and they value that. And it goes a long way with a contemplator for sure. Moving on. The next personality types is someone who's the mediator. These are the people who ask how. Okay, so for example, I'm the mediator usually. Right now, we're in the midst of finding a vehicle. Three vehicles have passed us by in the last 24 hours. They've been sold, traded, or not attainable. So we are at that stage where I'm asking how all the time. And my biggest fear is obviously loss of stability. So this is an issue where, people like myself, you want to make sure that we remain calm, level-headed. We're great listeners. Mediators like to contemplate different questions. You'll often not get an answer immediately, so be prepared for that kind of person. But they won't get an answer, and that's okay. And we have to deal with that, and we have to respect it. Mediators will often dislike conflict, and so they will internalize it and tolerate it. This is important also to keep in mind because you don't want that to always be the case. And mediators will try to keep everyone happy, often expense of their own happiness. Tips to communicate with a mediator include, thank you, Alex, is to show appreciation before difficult discussions. And what that will often means let's bring in everyone on this discussion. Let's encourage, what are some of the ideas we have? Is this what you want? Is this what they want? Is this what we all want? And then encourage people, right? Like bring it into the fold, the discussion for many players. Sometimes you need to do that in order to ensure that you're on the right path. Excuse me. Let mediators take charge of planning. It is a good strategy because mediators are often in control of different moving parts. So putting discussions in front of them, especially on the calendar, is very good. The idea is think, plan, and then think some more, sums up the mediator. Combine facts and feelings. So, stick to the facts, but also combine with what the feelings matter because oftentimes they really care for what feelings are are present there and who is feeling what in that particular moment. Give the mediator space to express their emotions and their opinions before you give your take on the situation. So again, you're valuing their opinion and have them share what it is that they think before you share your own. Avoid criticism and nagging. That's a good, common kind of general tip. And state the rules for the conversation at the outset, meaning we're not going to criticize. For example, you could say, if we're going to take in various opinions on this matter for so and so's health or related to their treatment options, we want to ensure that it's respectful of their ultimate outcome and goal. And their objective is to, let's say, leave the hospital. So if that's the case, then everyone is, in alignment with that. We're not going to be seeking something that is, for example, keeping the person at a hospital location for longer labor time. If that be the case, that's not always the case though. So I'm just giving an example. And then, of course, be prepared to take your time. A person needs some time to process. Always give people time to do that. Now, the final person is the socializer. This is the person who asks who, like who's going to be involved, who's going to be involved with the discussion, decision making, final outcome. Their biggest fear is social rejection. And these individuals are charismatic, they're enthusiastic, they're persuasive, excuse me, talkative, and social. They are also visual and creative. Socializers do not keep track of time very well. They'll often talk, and that's okay. But again, if you want an address a certain important matter and its time is pending and it's centered at that moment, it's important, you want to make sure you stick to the facts and you stay focused. They enjoy being the center of attention. And then in tips, you want to begin with a compliment, having them understand that they're appreciated, or you can say something nice about what they are doing or what they've said or what they are wearing, even. Gently redirect the conversation from tangents. You want to move it back to the focus and center idea. Be spontaneous. They appreciate that. So sometimes, just putting something ahead of someone is good, just because it gives that opportunity, that fresh creativeness. Start with feelings with them, obviously, and then focus on the big picture. Save the details for later. Staying positive, talk about what can go right in a situation, and then work together on plans on how to move forward and how to get to the ultimate outcome. And be prepared to move on quickly. Perfect. Thank you, Alex.
I'll talk about advocacy at the doctor's office. So your role is to help people, the person understand and navigate through the healthcare system. And as I say, often you'd be dealing with someone who's older, who has specific needs, and you know that they're not receiving the care, or they could receive better care than they're getting. Okay, and just being present can often be enough, but you can affect what is being said to whom and how well this information is understood just by being present. Um, I find that listening is sometimes the most important key to being involved with helping someone, but you need to also ask questions and be a supportive person to them. So when the client feels anxious or confused, you can help with that. Remember, what we're talking about most often is you're dealing with a family member, or you've been visiting someone and you recognize that there's significant or there's sets of unmet needs that you can help them achieve, and you know that this is what they need. So you recognize right off the bat that this person is competent, etc., but they need the help of someone who's going to be in their corner and make a difference. So as an advocate, you will help the medical professional understand the complete health situation of your client. So we'll get into this more, but obviously you're going to be talking with your client ahead of time, discussing what might be the issues, because maybe they haven't had a great way of expressing that to the medical team, and therefore you're helping them achieve that. Keep track of old and new symptoms. Sometimes there's a new symptom and then they haven't brought it up. Problems with current treatments. Maybe they're reacting to something, or significant changes to discuss with the doctor. Somebody might be having a significant problem that has developed and they don't know how to discuss it, or they might have forgotten, they might themselves forget to discuss it. And so you're helping them, making sure that these are the things that are listed. You're managing the current medications and making sure that the medications and supplements are reviewed on a regular basis. As you know, a lot of people receive quite a few different medications. They have them and they might have several different health issues, but sometimes those medications need to be reviewed because you're getting some problems with the medication interacting. And some of those medications aren't even medications. They might be taking also vitamins at the same time. So they're taking medications and then vitamins, and some of these things do interact. Go together to appointments and take notes. Now, it's very important when we're talking about taking notes that we remember the privacy rules. It's not your notes, they're the notes for the other person. Bring up important questions for the doctor, so you've had that discussion ahead of time, ensuring that critical details are not overlooked. So you have that plan ahead of time before you see the medical professional. So to be a healthcare advocate, you require the written permission of your client. We've already brought that up. I have it on page 51. The whole point of it is that you have consent to be there. Okay, to be an advocate in the healthcare system, you require the written permission of your client. As I said previous, that if you, let's say you're a daughter or a son of the person you're advocating for, they might not make any deal about it because it's the daughter or the son. But if it's somebody else, why would you be part of this unless you actually have an agreement in place? So we do have a sample agreement here, which we believe does outline exactly what you would need to have as that agreement. So arranging consent. Okay, this is a smaller page, but anyway, discuss with the person what the expectation he or she may have for their advocate, right? Do they want you to do a lot of research for them? Do they want you just to be there? Ensure that you are willing, able, and comfortable with doing these tasks before you agree to become their advocate. Even more so if they don't share your values. If they don't share your values, then you really don't want to be an advocate for that person. To speak on behalf of another person, you must receive consent from that person. Written permission is necessary before anyone can act on another person's behalf in obtaining documents or discussing personal information. Makes total sense. Once you both agree that you will be the person's advocate, complete the advocate agreement on page 49, Appendix A. Before your client's appointment, ask them about how they have been feeling and if they have anything that's bothering them, like if there's a new issue coming up. You may get more information when they're relaxed, so have time to think. So usually it's a good idea to meet with them ahead of time, have some tea or coffee with them, sit down and relax and discuss these issues. Asking a few separate times over a couple of weeks might help you collect more information as they might remember different things. So what happens then is you have some information ahead of time that you can share at the doctor's office if that's what your client wants. Okay, so this is the sample of the patient advocacy agreement. Like you see, it's in your booklet. Kathy's also put it up. But we can, as we say, we can mail you a booklet or we can email you the booklet and you can print it up and it's in there. Before you go, the time of day for the appointment is important. I know that doctors are never going to make you wait, but nonetheless, that might happen. The person may be better able to participate in the doctor's visit in the morning. You should know that if they prefer a morning visit or an afternoon visit because someone might sleep late, etc. Now, you might not have actually set that appointment. It might have been set by a previous doctor's visit, and you're just helping them now. You and your client should be well informed about the healthcare needs, understand the conditions, treatments, and any terms that doctors may use. And actually, the interesting thing is if the doctor is using terms that you don't understand, you should ask them to explain. Doctors are actually much better at that now, I think, than they might have used to have been in the past. And you'll see that we do tell you to ask for information sheets if there's any confusion. Kathy, we're gonna have to break this up for the next presentation because this is so small they can't probably read it. Well, I can read it, but anyway, these points will help you maintain positive, productive relationships with your client's medical providers as an advocate. You and your client are partners. Okay, doctors should listen to your concerns and answer your questions, so you must feel comfortable. The doctor should be sure that your client understands and feels comfortable with the decisions regarding their health. What are the person's concerns? These are the first questions. What are the person's concerns? Is it about physical symptoms like pain or shortness of breath or feelings such as being sad or worried? Is the person seeking information about medication side effects or the outcomes of prescribed treatments? Does the person want to report new symptoms or concerns? These are all questions you should ask ahead of time to your client. Generally discuss how to talk with a doctor about sensitive issues. Maybe the client doesn't want you in the room when they're talking about sensitive issues. You should know that ahead of time. He or she might prefer to talk to the doctor and your presence might be supportive of enough. They don't want you to say much. They just want you there as a moral presence to be there. That could be what they want. Find out if the person wants to have some time alone with the doctor. Or if they just tell you, I'd like to talk to the doctor, then you just have to leave, right? Good preparation involves being as specific as possible what they want to accomplish and achieve, and if possible, what the specific action should occur. So, for instance, gathering information. You need to know a list of symptoms, sort of basic stuff. List of prescriptions. Bring a list of the medicines he or she uses or put them in a bag and take them with you. This includes the herbal remedies, creams, supplements, over-the-counter medicines. It might be that they take a bunch of vitamins. As I get older, I take more vitamins. It's funny how that goes. Test results. Gather information from visits with the other doctors or specialists. And there might be some drug allergies. If there's any allergies or information you have ahead of time or they have ahead of time, it's important to have that. It might be a new doctor, it might be a specialist that you're going to go visit because they already were identified as having a certain condition. Now you're going to the specialist. Tips on how to be a great advocate. Well, bring this information along with a list of questions and topics that you and your client have discussed. Have a notebook designated. Now, remember about these notebooks. The notebook means that you're actually, how would you say, maintaining information for the other person. Now, why are you doing this? Well, it's very important that when you leave the appointment or before you go to the appointment, that you know what you want to discuss. So you have a notebook of information. But remember, that is the information that pertains to this other person. It's not your notebook, right? Very clearly that privacy is of the utmost. This is their information. Record the date and the time of the meeting, if it's a telephone call, etc., or if it's a personal meeting. Record your discussions. Now, of course, we're not talking about recording in the sense of AI might be doing a recording. We're talking about basic information. Now, someone actually might record it with, some sort of audio recording, etc., or some other way of recording. Write the speaker's name, title or position, phone number, date, time, and information obtained from the conversation. Well, you want to make sure that if you talk to someone who's a nurse, etc., and she's advising something, that you know who you talk to. Sometimes people will say or promise things verbally that they do not act on. So have a written record of what was agreed to, what was said. It might be very helpful to know this ahead of time, okay? Keep a file of written responses and other documents, letters, emails. It's also important to keep track of these in a case, sort of in a folder, right? And you need them because you might need them for the future. Now, it's also important that when there's a new issue or a new health issue, that you gain information about that. So you might ask the physician, do you have a printout about that? Can we have more information about it? And they would often have that for you. They might just send it to you, right? Write down your questions. If you or your client become too upset to talk, you can hand the written list over to the doctor to read. It's very interesting that that's an issue in my personality type. If someone's too upset to talk, but you could see it might be a very emotional situation, and someone's become quite upset about a situation. And maybe the best thing at this point is just simply to hand them the questions that you have and try and explain it. The date of the appointment. Call the office to see if the doctor's on time. Doctor's never going to be late, so don't worry about that. So with his or her appointment, sometimes they might get late. So inform the receptionist that you'll be at the appointment to be the note taker. It's very important that the receptionist knows you're coming. We want to be upfront. You are the advocate for this person. Bring a bottle of water, a magazine, or a book or something for your client in case there's an unexpected delay. Bring the list of medicines he or she uses, that was already mentioned, or put them in a bag to take with you. This includes everything: prescriptions, herbal remedies, supplements, other over-the-counter medicines. Why are we doing this again? It should be reviewed at least on a yearly basis. Be on time for your appointment. Introduce yourself to any new doctors or nurses. Respect your client's privacy. You know, we should actually underline this because this is as I've said it over and over again, this is like maybe the most important thing. Go to the waiting room if the person requires a physical examination. Let the doctor know if your client has any hearing or vision problems and that makes it hard to communicate with them. Be aware of your body language. Sit up straight, look the doctor in the eye. I'm not talking about being how would you say, so assertive, but you know what I'm saying. Communicate. These visual cues, right? Take notes. Be kind even if the doctor's not kind. Now, I'm not suggesting doctors aren't kind. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that there's times maybe that doctor is also tired. Could be the end of the day. and the doctor's short, or maybe the doctor is making suggestions and they're feeling frustrated. Be kind. If you feel upset, take a deep breath. Count to 10. Then express yourself. This will calm you down. Remember, we don't want to ever be, how would you say, the door. We want to be helping this person receive the help they need, not the person who prevents them from receiving the help that they need. And when the visit is coming to an end, finish asking questions or bring up your concerns. So if there's new concerns or something else that hasn't been dealt with, you can bring that up. Listen, do not move on to your next thought or retort before the doctor's finished speaking. So don't interrupt them. Do not be intimidated by the doctor or any other healthcare professional. You are there as an advocate. Some people get intimidated by people, you go to a doctor's office, some people get very nervous. That's sort of normal. It's like being human. If your client wants to speak when the doctor asks you a question, turn towards him or her and suggest that he or she answer. So if they want to speak, always let your client speak. That's you're only there for them. You're not there for yourself. Let the doctor know of any changes in your client's health since the last visit. Now, your client might express it themselves. Keep the discussion focused on problem solving. We have an issue. Maybe your client, as I say, needs services. This is a prime example. They need services. They need a couple of hours a week, someone coming in, helping them with whatever they need because they're not caring for themselves anymore in the way that they used to be able to. These might be very important issues that come up. Why would you talk to the doctor about it? Because the doctor would then say, we can then talk to the CCAC, etc., or the LIN in order to see if those services can be made available. And have the following questions answered. How serious is the condition? How will it impact your client's daily life? Is it chronic? Will it worsen over time or go away with treatment? What causes the condition? What are the signs and symptoms to watch for? Is it contagious? Well, these are sort of basic questions, but it's important to know, especially if it's a new diagnosis, exactly what's happened or what's happening. Do not be embarrassed about asking questions. Once again, we say you have to be assertive, but very, 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 very polite at the same time. Ask questions to make sure you understand the doctor's instructions and explanations, but sometimes you may not understand. And it's good to ask the questions, the clarifying questions, repeating your own words what the doctor said just to make sure you understand. And if it's a new medication that's prescribed, ask them how effective is this treatment. They may actually not have all the information, but usually they would be able to print out some sheets and take a look at it. They might be able to compare it to previous treatments that existed because it might have a doctor that has been, in the medical practice for quite a few years, and they'll say, well, we used to do this and had these problems. This seems to be a better treatment. How will the medication that your client is currently taking interact in the body? How is the medication taken? Is it taken with food? Is it taken without food? Should I take it in the morning? Should I not take it in the morning, etc.? How long will your client need to take it? Are they going to take it for the rest of their life, or are they going to take it for a month? How much will it cost? Does your client's insurance, provincial or private, cover the cost? Now, in Ontario, those issues are pretty standard, actually, how it's done. What are the side effects? It's quite important to know what the side effects are. Sometimes you're going to need to establish another appointment right away because if it's a new medication, you want them to try it for a period of time, and then maybe you should look at that right away because there might be side effects, there might not be side effects. Will this affect your client's ability to function independently? How long will it take for the medication to work? Are there any alternative treatments? What if they decide not to take the medication? That's a good question. Someone might say, I don't want to take this medication, or I don't want to take medications. That's their right to say that. But what's the effect of that? Read up on any new medication that the doctor prescribes. What tests do you recommend? So this is important because if you are referred for a test, obviously then there's going to be another appointment somewhere. How accurate is the test? It's a good question. Very good question. And a lot of these testings are getting better than they were before. Now, when and how will the client get the results? Sometimes it takes a while to get the results. And what happens then? Is it going to be another appointment? Will we be referred to a specialist? What do we anticipate? If a new medication is prescribed, how effective is this treatment? Okay, I think we went through this already for some reason. Okay. Okay, because I went backwards. That was me being silly. Okay. Ask the doctor whether or not she has any recommendations with respect to the lifestyle factors, including diet, stress management, exercise. Inquire about services that they may be offered that may be beneficial to the person. Dietitian, Meals on Wheels, outings. The doctor may be able to refer you to a counselor, community agency to help. Someone might need to come into someone's home a few hours a week. How do we make that happen? Write down all the instructions given by the doctor and have him or her review it before you leave the office. I need to know how this will happen. Do not have your client sign any consent form until he or she understands it completely and the doctor has answered all their questions. Ask for information sheets that you can take home. So Susan used to work at the health center in West Lorne, Ontario, and when she worked there in the library, one of the most common things she did was print out information sheets. The doctor there at the time or the nurse practitioners would say, make sure we have so much of this information available. So she'd print certain things out ahead of time. And they'd be in certain places so they knew where to find it. Some patient might come in and they say, well, here's some more information about that. And oh, we have it here. Oh, we seem to have run out of that information. One of the most important things she did was make sure the information sheets were available in their spot so the doctor, nurse practitioner, etc., could access it easily. Ask when the client should next contact the doctor to monitor progress. Get results. Determine if the treatment is working. Might not be working. Remember, sometimes there's multiple treatments for a condition, and we're trying this treatment, and this treatment might not be working well for that person. We all have different bodies, right? I ask the doctor to do a full medication review at least once a year. This is to ensure the medications are working well together, being taken at the right time and in the right combinations, and to check if all medications are still needed. Very important. Very important, because sometimes some things are not needed anymore, and that's okay. And after the visit, make follow-up appointments right away. If necessary, help your client fill any prescriptions. Ask the pharmacist for information on side effects of the medication. They may also have information sheets. Well, we already discussed that. Discuss with your client how the meeting went. So maybe your client says you spoke too much. It's good information. Maybe they said you didn't speak enough. Good information. You should review that because you want to be an effective advocate for them because you're helping them receive the services and the care that they need. Was the visit a good experience? What could we have done better? It's good like to have these discussions. Did I, the advocate, ask too many questions? Well, I've already covered that. Did my client speak up for himself or herself? Did they feel that they had enough time to ask the doctor questions? These are all things to discuss after the visit. Get together, have some tea or maybe some coffee, a nice relaxing time so you're visiting again, so it's nice, and have these discussions about how they thought it went. Maybe they thought it didn't go well at all. Maybe they thought it went exceptionally well. Good information, okay? We don't take it personally. It's just good information. Remember, a successful interaction with the healthcare system requires persistence. Okay. Kathy, you want to take over?
Sure. So one of these comments here, this one is very important. And so just this is from the WebMD Chief Medical Officer. This is something to keep in mind, especially by Dr. John White. He says the healthcare system can be very challenging to navigate. There are a lot of regulations that can impact your access to care, and they can be confusing. Sometimes your technique does not work the first time. You need to keep at it when accessing certain services, and you need to speak up. There is also an interesting dynamic with older adults when it comes to healthcare. They often say they do not want to bother their doctor or they want to be a good patient. Excuse me. We have to help them understand that being a good patient or a good advocate for someone else means getting what you need to make sure you get quality care. So that's key. And now, in terms of now that we're in this post-COVID era, in terms of doctor's appointments and other issues like corona or other infectious diseases, sometimes when there's an outbreak, you might expect different things to happen at the doctor's office. They will often wear personal protective equipment like masks and gloves, which is still very commonplace. Offices are often disinfected, sanitized regularly. They're usually set up for social distancing, so at least 6 feet apart. You might need to check in occasionally by phone or wait in your car instead of the waiting room. That happened during COVID, so something that may happen in the future. And they may only and may be the only patient in the office at a certain time. You will have to answer questions based on possible contact with infected individuals, and you may be asked to wear a mask. To limit your risk of getting sick, keep your hands away from your face, wash your hands well and often. Okay. And obviously find out if there's any outbreaks. When we visit, we often will get clearance, call ahead a few days and see if in the visiting, in a long-term care facility or in the nursing home, is everything okay to proceed as usual? Sometimes we get a response back, oh, there's been an outbreak, so refrain from visiting at this time. So just be aware of that. Okay. Moving on. And now, in terms of if you are advocating at a hospital and or visiting or monitoring the care of a person you've been involved in terms of visiting them, as an advocate, you may find yourself advocating for someone who's in the hospital. Your primary role may be to visit that person, observe anything that may be happening, and advocate for what they would like based on prior discussions. So again, keeping all in mind of what you know that person to be. You just spoke with a person who often will participate in some of our programs. And he said that, whatever happens to me, make sure I'm not hospitalized. I don't want to go to the hospital. So this was a very interesting comment. He's very weary of going into a hospital setting. He doesn't want to be institutionalized, and he's very concerned with being institutionalized against his will. So again, being aware of those types of fears, again, that's the type of timing that you want to go in and ideally be with that individual if they're admitted or if something is happening. Just to be a common face is a great asset, and it's a comfort to them to know that you're there. You may need to inform a family member or the decision maker, if they have one, about a situation or treatment you have observed, if there's any issues at the hospital. In many cases, the person you are advocating for will be fully aware, and may not need you to speak on their behalf. However, your presence should improve the psychological well-being of the patient and may speed up the recovery time. In addition, being there may result in better health care from doctors and nurses. Now, if a person is again at the hospital, this is you want to visit as often as possible. You also want to monitor the medication. Take notes of the medication they're being given to make sure it is the correct drug at the correct dose, given at the right time. Check with your client to make sure that they're getting the right levels of medication. They should not be in pain or over medicated. Inform hospital staff of any special needs of the client. So, for example, if they're gluten-free, or if they're vegetarian, or if they have other nutritional needs, things like that, it's very important to have that. Sometimes a patient may not be able to swallow very easily, so they may ask the physician has put in their notes that there needs to be a thickening agent placed in their water or added to their solutions, anything that they're given orally. So it's important that you keep on top of that. Sometimes the patient may forget. So make your client, the patient, more comfortable. If you're allowed to, bring skin moisturizer, lip balm, a personal item like a blanket, whatever they feel that is necessary, even a family photo if they're allowed to, that's great. A favorite book or a magazine, newspaper, those are all good things. Throughout their stay, you may wish to read aloud a favorite book to them. Again, a very nice thing to do, comfort, and it is a huge asset in terms of giving them an opportunity to be with someone they know and trust. Studies have found that the median rate of medication error or unintentional medication discrepancy was nearly 50% in adult and elderly patients after hospital discharge. Nearly 20% of adult and elderly patients in studies were reported to be affected by adverse drug events, ADEs, after hospital discharge. So this is a very critical point here to keep in mind. Whenever a person is leaving a hospital, being discharged, that they're given the right doses and the medication is actually double checked, making sure that doesn't contraindicate with any of their pre-existing condition medications as they're going back to home, that they're realizing what they have to do at certain times, because the medications matter, and how they relate with each other and how they interact with each other is very important. Moving on. Again, making sure that the person understands the medication regimen is very different from the client's pre-hospitalization medications. And so before they leave the hospital, make sure you understand what their medication protocol should be, what they should be following, and why the changes are being made. This is very important, and it's the same point. When a person has dementia, This is a critical point too to keep in mind. Dementia develops gradually and gets progressively worse. There's different types of dementia. A person can become agitated, some can become aggressive, some can become a little bit more verbal. And so it depends on the type of dementia and how progressive it is. But also, being in an unfamiliar hospital environment can be disorienting and confusing. And hospitals are noisy and they're full of unfamiliar people, bright lights, reflective surfaces. Your client may not be feeling well. He or she may be touched and questioned by medical staff. Someone with dementia often cannot or will not accurately report symptoms of pain. They may not remember what happened or why they need to be in the hospital in the first place. This can cause agitation, delirium, aggression, worsening of symptoms, and other challenging behaviors. Hospital stays can bring out these behaviors, so it's important to keep that in mind if you're working with a client who has signs of dementia.
I'm going to make one comment here, though. It's often thought that someone who has dementia is likely incompetent, and they may not be incompetent because uh, dementia comes on very slowly and it progresses over time. So somebody might be reasonably competent, meaning they can make decisions for themselves and they certainly understand the nature of the questions. But they still have then issues related to this dementia at the same time that we're concerned about.
Yeah. And then, so as an advocate, you can help relieve some of these stressors for them. You can ask for harsh lighting to be dimmed. You can ask the patient to be moved to a quieter area. Bring in a simple calming activity for your client to focus on and help them stay busy while they wait for treatment or tests. And take notes. If you notice expressions of pain or changes in their symptoms, you can update the doctors and the nurses as they proceed. Now, when it comes to delirium, this can happen suddenly and typically changes throughout the day. If an older adult with no history of cognitive impairment suddenly starts having cognitive issues, they start to act differently. We had a case of this happen where a patient was taking napkins out of a Kleenex box and just routinely taking them out and doing that. It was almost like there was no cognition happening. We didn't know what was going on. That could be an issue, obviously. This could happen now. Cognitive issues can happen during or after hospitalization. It is most likely not dementia. It could actually be delirium. So this is why it's important to notice the changes in someone's behavior if they happen quickly, because it could be delirium. People with delirium often have terrifying hallucinations, delusions, and are unable to think clearly or focus. In older hospital patients, these symptoms can be misdiagnosed as dementia. But some patients with delirium are agitated and combative, and others are sleepy and cannot pay attention. So there's a difference, there's a wide range, right? They may show symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. It can happen at any age, and delirium is more common in hospitalized persons older than age 65. Research has linked delirium to longer hospital stays, greater risk of falls, increased risk of developing dementia, and an increased death rate. Okay. Delirium is most likely to develop also when there are large doses of anti-anxiety medications and narcotics are given to the patient. Tranquilizers used to treat anxiety, called benzo, benzodiazepines, are known to trigger or exacerbate the problem. Patients are also who are intensive care ICU are potentially more at risk where delirium may develop. Patients are also who are heavily sedated may find that delirium is more potentially likely. And also if a patient is on a ventilator, if the environment is busy, noisy, and brightly lit, their sleep is constantly interrupted, and the staff keeps changing, be aware of potentially delirium happening because it is something that can happen. It can happen quickly. And then some warning signs are that the person changes in their concentration. They don't have attention, and so there's an inattention to what's happening around them. They may have disordered thinking. It doesn't quite make sense what they're thinking or what they're saying. They're disorganized in their speech. They may also have excessive drowsiness. They feel disoriented. They don't know where they are, why they're there, or they may have show signs of inappropriate behavior. They could have also unexplained difficulty with feeding themselves and unexplained difficulty with mobility or movement of the person. They cannot move, so they're immobile. These are all warning signs of delirium. And what you can do is speak to the doctor to minimize the amount of medication. If you notice negative side effects, ask them to make changes immediately. This is very important. Ask the staff to dim the lights and turn down noisy machines if possible. Close the door to reduce noise. Keep your client hydrated. Again, it's very important to keep hydration always. Stay with your client so that they have a familiar face, and arrange for your client to get a maximum amount of undisturbed sleep. So, asking doctors and nurses if their visits can be coordinated or less frequent without harm, obviously, to the patient's health. And have a large print clock and a calendar visible so your client can see the time and date. Bring a family photo so they have familiar faces to look at. And whenever possible, ask your client to take short walks or practice therapy exercises. This is very important. Stretching, getting up if they're able to, increasing their mobility is very important and impactful. And so, a study by Harvard researchers found that a variety of non drug interventions, making sure patients' sleep wake cycles were preserved, that they had their eyeglasses, hearing aids, and that they were not dehydrated, reduced delirium by 53%. And as a result, falls among hospitalized patients was reduced by 62%. So, this is a very important point to keep in mind when your patient is actually admitted at the hospital. Okay. Perfect. So some suggestions, if you are interested in learning more, is to accept the opportunity to be a patient advocate. If someone asks you simply, can you attend a meeting with me with a patient, sorry, as a patient advocate, do consider doing that. Sorry. And have that opportunity to go and actually be in an appointment with them. Excuse me. You can start a support group within a community that you're part of if you have access to that type of community. You can also, we mentioned this here now, is about burnout. So volunteers that are very active and often will go out and visit with volunteers and often will participate in meeting with people, they can suffer sometimes from burnout. So it's important to be aware of that. If that's, sorry, if that is the case, please contact us because it's important that you take an opportunity to take time and rest for yourself as well, and make sure you don't get into that place where you are potentially burning out. Also, we encourage you to keep a journal. Evaluate your appointments as they go, and think of opportunities for enrichment. How can you enhance that next meeting in the future when you are speaking with that client or that patient? And then if you ever have any concerns, feel free to talk to whoever referred you to us or even call us on our helpline. The numbers are listed here, both our office line and helpline lines as well. Okay, perfect. Now, as you all know, being a patient advocate matters, so we thank you for being here. We also will have an upcoming opportunity for you to join us in another training, which is actually the Being With training. And if you want to register, just click the link that's in the chat box here. It is a free training again by myself and Alex, and it is an opportunity for you to actually learn how to be a visitor, a volunteer visitor in your community, visit with those who are in your family or even outside your family, in your community, in your neighborhood, and in your circles. So it isn't a great opportunity. It's a 2-day training. It's happening on June 17th and 18th. It's also in the evening from 7 to 9 p.m. And if you want to register, please click on the link here. And thank you all very, very much for being here. If anyone has any questions, we'll open up the floor now. Please unmute yourselves if you have any questions. Thank you. Anyone?
We do have previous training sessions that we've done that are also that we have a recording of. So that's also possible. There is the booklet. You can contact Kathy if you have any other questions to go through it. I think the booklet is quite complete. There's also the manual. We have a patient advocacy program, and then we have this sort of manual for the basic information. So we have a fair amount of information for you that you can be downloaded and or sent to you. So it's um, we try to provide the services that you need. But as I say, most people are getting involved with a family member or a close friend. But if you've also been part of the visiting program, as I say, You will at times find someone who really could use an advocate. And if you've got training to be an advocate, it could be invaluable to that person that you're helping them out to receive the services that they need, especially if you consider how the Canadian system has become quite bogged down. If you consider, if you consider it that it's becoming harder in some ways, depending on the services that are needed. It's becoming harder to get some of those services. Um, and so if there's somebody helping somebody get those services, that's very important. I'll make one other comment. My son, Peter, he's autistic, and my wife was able to help him, over the years, get the services he needed. So most of the people you're dealing with, they're fully competent, etc. But that doesn't mean they know the services they needed. But then there's others who are may have early stages of dementia, right? So they're still competent, but they're having difficulties. But in the case of my son Pete, if Susan did not go out of the way to get him the services he needed, I have no idea how he would have gotten it because everything was a hoop. You had to jump through this hoop and this, and these things should be easily done because in his case, you're dealing with someone with disabilities, right? But no, it wasn't easy. And it was a constant having to seek these services and achieve these services, whether it was his disability benefit or different things with that. It's just something going on. So anyway, if there's no other questions, I think we're hoping to see you again for future training sessions, and you can contact Kathy at any time.
Yes. And also, I'll just mention this really quickly. We have a fantastic opportunity for anyone that you know who may, a senior who's interested in having calls. I know sometimes people are unable to receive an in-person visitor. So if any one of you know some seniors who would like to receive calls, we have a great new brochure and it's a great postcard. It's called a Community of Hope Outreach. It's a free Canada-wide calling service where we've trained and vetted the volunteers. They've all gone through a vulnerable sector check, and we can ask them to contact seniors that you know on a regular basis. It's free of charge, there's no cost to it, and it's a great opportunity. I'll also mention that we are a registered charity. We have the helpline, which is available for help, advice, and support regarding euthanasia or any assisted suicide prevention and or end of life treatment cases. So if you need any copies of these cards or if you need any of the brochures or postcards, feel free to contact us at the office. We can send those to you. And if you do need any support or help, please do contact us. Help is just a phone call away. And thank you for your support. We're able to host these great events online for free, thanks to the generosity of our donors. So if you're inclined to give, we appreciate it very much. And we appreciate any support you're able to provide and afford us. So thank you all for joining us tonight. And thank you, Alex, again, for being our co-host.
Can I
Thank you very much.
mention something? Is that okay?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Okay, I had an appointment with a cardiologist last week. It was a recall thing because, annual sort of a thing, but um, I was very happy to see that they had a form now in that office to put the items down that you're concerned about. It was a good format. And then when I left the cardiology office, the cardiologist had given me the paper that they have that responds for a patient follow-up plan. It's got his name and patient follow-up plan. And your cardiac condition is, and he filled that in, and you will be reevaluated by a cardiologist in this many weeks or months or year. He filled that in. And prior to your next visit, you will have these tests done. And he ticked off the ones that were on the list that I'll have done before my next thing. And then he wrote 5 different items at the bottom that were information that I should have about um, just different things about continue my blood thinner and stuff. And I really told him and the nurse or the receptionist how welcome this communication was to go out of the office with a written piece of paper because I don't like verbal stuff when people are anxious. They don't retain verbal information anyhow. It's a physical fact. We can't learn things when we're too nervous,
Yeah.
and a medical appointment makes you nervous. So it was a really good thing to see that the doctor is trying to communicate in a written form.
Very
Yeah,
good.
I'm hoping more of these doctors will do that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great news. That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Any other
Very good.
questions? Anyone? Okay, great. Well,
You
thank
can
you.
you can email Compassionate Community Care, as I say, or you can call the number, but they're happy to serve your needs and help you in your needs. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you both. That's very good.